Hello YouTube. Social justice is killing us, and here's how. Social justice is all about oppression. This group of people has it worse than average in society, so they must be oppressed. Because they're oppressed, they need to be helped, not criticized, and anyone who is criticizing rather than helping them is clearly a bad person. This, of course, all rests on the faulty assumption that A, those people are actually a homogeneous group, and that B, this group is doing worse than average because of oppression rather than some other cause or causes. Now, this idea is annoying, especially to those of us who don't like when faulty ideas are popular. But how is it lethal? Well, to discuss that, we first have to talk about the Muslim problem. In Europe, millions of Muslim migrants have flooded into many countries with no oversight, no background checks, and no plan for what to do with them in the long term. And that's on top of the already huge numbers of Muslim immigrants who already live in those countries. Now, the issue isn't that these people are Muslim per se. The issue is that many of these Muslims are intentionally not integrating into the culture of the country they live in. Self-segregated communities exist throughout Europe wherein the Muslim communities have made their own little version of their home culture. On the face of it, this isn't a huge issue. It's quite common actually for immigrants to band together based on a shared culture and integrate as little as possible. This is the reason that Chinatowns exist in many Western cities. The difference is that Chinese culture is not fundamentally incompatible with Western culture. The cultures these Muslim immigrants, refugees, and migrants come from are significantly different from our own culture. They don't believe in things like gay rights or women's rights in the way we do. They aren't as opposed to Islamic terrorism as we are. In fact, some of them support it. They don't believe in the separation of church and state. In fact, for many of them, that's a big part of their religious beliefs, that church and state should be one thing. And as long as they keep to themselves in their self-segregated communities, those ideals will not change. And given that terrorist attacks are quite common in the Middle East and many Muslim countries, it's no surprise really that terrorist attacks are becoming common in areas within reach of these segregated Muslim communities. So what does social justice have to do with this? Well, the way to solve this problem, in my opinion, would first and foremost would be for society as a whole to be openly critical of the mass immigration, the segregation of these communities, and the ideals held by these communities, especially when those ideals run counter to our own. Once we start doing that, governments will be forced to begin taking action and creating policy that will force or at least encourage the integration of these communities and over time, hopefully, will secularize them. Governments ideally would also be forced to adopt more sensible immigration and refugee acceptance policies. But we are prevented from doing that by the stranglehold social justice has over media and mainstream culture as a whole. See, because the Muslims in these communities are part of an oppressed group, like black people in America, and they have it worse than society at large, they must be oppressed. And they are obviously a homogeneous group, so being critical of any of them is like being critical of all of them. And this is a particularly effective argument when it comes to Muslim migrants and refugees. I mean, who can argue against the idea that refugees are oppressed? I mean, if anyone's oppressed, it's refugees, right? So the end result here is that there has been no widespread or mainstream criticism of these segregated Muslim communities or the policies that made them possible. Without that criticism, there is no reason for the governments to take action, and things will likely never get better. And the end result is, terrorists raised and harbored in these communities have been and will continue to keep killing innocent people. And it has to stop. Somehow, the social justice community, or at the very least mainstream culture, needs to be convinced that it's okay to be critical of the ideas and opinions of Muslims. They need to be convinced that it's okay to be critical of open-door immigration policies. They need to be convinced that it's okay to demand that immigrants and refugees conform to the ideals of their new country. And the thing is, social justice types are just who we need. When it comes to call-out culture, when it comes to generating outrage and writing angry articles about something, they're some of the best we've got. If we can somehow get them onto our side when it comes to the Muslim problem, governments would have to start taking notice and start changing policies. So when it comes to convincing this community, I think we need to appeal to their desire to save the world and make it a better place. Appeal to their utopian ideals of everyone living in peace and harmony. I mean, this isn't about criticizing Muslims or Islam. It's about criticizing individuals and ideas that don't match with Western liberal values. What I'm saying is that to win this fight, to lessen the daily threat of terrorism within the borders of Western countries, we need to enlist mainstream society. And sad as it is to say, every terrorist attack makes that job easier. I really hope that it doesn't have to go on much longer before we can do something about it. Until next time, I'm Positive Improvement, and I wish you all the best.